This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. It's like that transition day from the Eagles completely embarrassing themselves to the NBA draft tomorrow night. We're going to indulge in all elements of that spectrum today here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we got Bryan Toporek from the NBA podcast, also writes for Forbes Sports. We'll talk about the Sixers and the NBA draft coming up at 6:20, plus your text board messages at 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. And as we are another day removed from that loss, as aforementioned, one of the biggest things that stands out is when you see someone like Jim Schwartz getting up there and speaking to the media and saying, that was embarrassing. We played horrible. We got to do better. And when that's the second time that he has said that this year about this team, you really have to step back and wonder. And I'm not saying this to be a negative person. I'm saying this to be completely upfront about where my thought process is going. Should we all just own the fact that this is not the Eagles' year? Like, the more and more I think about how everything is going, Mike and Broads having, almost the entire show revolving around the Eagles because we just can't escape this conversation back and forth. And it's great conversation that the guys had for 4 hours. But if you can't escape elements of that conversation, what are we really conversing about anymore? At some point, what we're doing is we're spinning our wheels around the bush, and the bush is this team is not good enough for anything. Maybe it's just not their year. Maybe this is just not the Eagles' year, and we just got to own it. We got to accept it. We got to own and accept the reality that Carson Wentz may never be what we thought he would be. We have to own and accept the fact that this Philadelphia Eagles team, as constructed, was always in a bit of a year of transition anyway. Look at the contracts that are coming on and off the books in the next few years. Look at the guys who are getting older. Look at the guys who were injured last year. Look at the way it's 2020, right? Not every team is coming out of 2020 looking golden. Not every team can be the Cardinals, okay? Where you get an idiot like Bill O'Brien calls you up and says, hey, can I give you the best wide receiver in the game for nothing? And before whoever you are wants to text in and tell me that Howie Roseman should have made that trade, you have no evidence to prove that Howie Roseman had a chance to make that deal anyway. So you can just relax with sending in that tweet or that text at 609-403-0973 or at 973 ESPN on Twitter or at Josh Hennig on Twitter. Side note, I love fandom, but only people who are delusional fans believe that every trade that's made is an opportunity for the Eagles to make a trade too. Because there's never evidence every time a trade is made that the Eagles could have had a chance too. I love the Anytime Hotline call. The guys played yesterday. The guy was like, Howie Roseman could have made the trade for DeAndre Hopkins. You got no evidence that trade could have been made. Come on. You have no evidence that the Texans would have given the Eagles a chance to make that deal. But I digress. Maybe there's a level of this football team where we just have to admit that Carson Wentz isn't good enough. The team isn't good enough. And whether they win the division or not, it is what it is. Maybe this team was never, no matter what the scenario was, going to win. I know on paper a lot of us sat here, myself included, said this is a team that can win the division. Looking at the team on paper, projecting out everything that's going on. But maybe there were elements that we overlooked. Maybe there were things that we didn't fully want to admit about the situation. Maybe we overestimated Wentz's ability. Maybe we looked at all the coaching hires the Eagles made in the offseason and assumed that all of those guys were going to be beneficial for the team. Maybe they're not beneficial for the team. Maybe because of the offseason with COVID-19 that hurt the development of the relationship with the coaches or the chemistry of the coaching staff. Maybe we looked at the Eagles and their injuries and we didn't realize how important some of these players are to the team. Maybe, just maybe, we assumed that certain players would have bigger impacts than they were going to. Maybe if Jalen Reagor wasn't injured for a chunk of the season, maybe things would be different. Maybe if Zach Ertz wasn't looking for a new contract, maybe that would have affected his play differently. There's so many variables that go into why the Eagles are where they are right now. And it's not to take away, for lack of a better term, blame or responsibility from anybody in particular. It doesn't mean that Doug Peterson isn't any less responsible for the team being what seemed like completely unprepared for the Giants game on Sunday. It doesn't vacate responsibility from Wentz's abominable play this year. It doesn't vacate responsibility from the Eagles' defense having trouble adjusting in action of the game to what is going on in front of them when they're running misdirection for the 200th time, it seems like this year. But maybe, just maybe, this team was always destined to not be great. Just like the 76ers last year, what was the attitude? The expectations were sky high, right? The attitude was this 76ers team is going to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals and maybe even the NBA Finals, right? And then what happened? Well, then the season played out. And then we were hit in the face with a big dose of reality that said, that was a good joke. You guys' expectations were unrealistic. And it's not that the expectations were a bad idea. Let's be realistic. Think about how reality works. We all place expectations on things. We expect something to be good or we expect it to be bad. Very rarely do we go into things with an open mind. That's just the way it is with everything. You see somebody out and about, okay? In the era before COVID-19, we had to wear masks, right? And somebody would smile at you and say hello. Well, you're already going to start drawing a conclusion on that person. Your expectations for that person have already morphed immediately based on your interpretation of them smiling and saying hello to you. So, ultimately, with a team like the 76ers last year, we expected them to go into the season and prove that this is the year that Joel Embiid takes a step forward and Ben Simmons is finally going to shoot threes and Al Horford's going to help this defense. And Tobias Harris, he's got a full offseason with the 76ers. He's going to come in here and be way better than he was for a handful of months last year. And those expectations were not met. And that was part of the frustration. Part of the frustration and the exasperation with the Sixers was we expected them to be better, and then when they weren't, it was like being punched in the face. On the flip side, the 2017 Eagles, I don't remember anybody picking that team to win the Super Bowl. I don't remember many people. There's like a handful of people who thought the team could still have success with Nick Foles at quarterback, but I don't remember anybody saying Nick Foles is going to help this team get to the Super Bowl and be a Super Bowl MVP, and then they win the Super Bowl that year against the Patriots because the expectations were lower. Since the Eagles won the Super Bowl, expectations every year since have been high. And that's part of the reason why you're frustrated, because the expectations have been elevated. So maybe our expectations were wrong. Maybe our perception of this team was incorrect. I'm willing to admit that. I'm willing to admit that my perspective on this football team was wrong. Now we recalibrate. Now we realign what has happened this year with what is going on. And what is going on is we have a head coach who's frustrated. We have a quarterback who plays more hero ball than actual football. We have a defensive unit who is being exposed and exploited every single week because the team didn't spend enough resources on certain positions on the defensive side of the ball, the organization prioritized getting Carson Wentz more weapons, and half of those weapons haven't been healthy this year. Some things are out of your control. And that's why I'm saying, and you can tell me if I'm wrong at 609-403-0973. Is it maybe just time for us to admit the Philadelphia Eagles are just destined this year to not be a good football team? And how many losses does it take for you to get to that point, too? Maybe you're not where I'm at, right? Maybe you're saying, Josh, there's still hope. Josh, we haven't seen the best of this team yet. Maybe you're someone out there, whether you're sitting in your car, whether you're sitting at home, wherever you're at, you're listening to me and you're saying, Josh, I think that you're being too negative. Tell me at 609-403-0973, because I look at this football team and I see a team that we get higher expectations. Now they haven't met those expectations, and now we're all shaking our fists and pounding tables and yelling at the television screen and nitpicking and hitting that rewind button, or at least I am, and going back and rewatching plays and saying, I don't understand how that happened. Why are you scanning the field? Carson Wentz, will you move your head to the left side of the field to see that somebody's open in the flat? We wouldn't have these frustrations if we didn't expect Carson Wentz and this team to be better. So maybe all of our expectations were wrong, and maybe, just maybe, this team was always destined to be a slot mess of 3-5-1, and for us to be watching the NFC East be the worst division in the NFL since the 1984 AFC Central. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. 609-403-0973. Reminder, coming up about 17 minutes from now, Bryan Toporek will join us from Forbes Sports and the NBA podcast. Talk about the Sixers and the NBA. A couple of your texts before we hit the break. 609-403-0973. Joey D. in Ventnor chimes in. This is tough call with COVID. Does Hurts give the Eagles more of a better flow on offense than herky-jerky Wentz? Joey D., I don't know. Because I don't think Jalen Hurts has enough of the playbook under his belt for us to know either way. It's like going into a situation where if you ever play Texas Hold'em and you know you don't have a great hand, but you don't know what the other three people have at the table, and you're waiting for the river and the bend, and you keep looking at your hand, and you're like, I'm looking at my hand, and I'm not fully sure that what the hand I got is actually any good. But I feel like the same gamble with Jalen Hurts. I don't know what we have in Hurts because he didn't have a regular offseason. We don't know what he's capable of yet. So I don't know. I don't know if he would be any better because we haven't even seen him out there for more than a play or two. How am I supposed to judge a guy and know if he can be better if I haven't seen him play anything? And honestly, the problem with Wentz in the offense is, and I've said this multiple times now, how many times do I have to hear Wentz do kill, kill, kill with the hand signal across his chest and then him change the play at the line of scrimmage? I don't know. Is he changing out of the play that Doug Peterson called to another play that he thinks is better? Is he going from play one to play two? Should the Eagles go with play two instead of play one at the line of scrimmage? Is there a disconnect between Wentz and the head coach? Is there a disconnect between Wentz and the coaching staff? Is Press Taylor giving him misinformation as their quarterback coach? Is somebody whispering in Wentz's ear some contrary information to implode the offense? I don't know the answer to that. But Joey D., I like the fact that you're thinking outside the box. Get one more text for me at the break, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973, PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Dan from EHC chimes in, says it's really difficult to admit when your team is bad. Reality sucks. That's Dan in EHT. He goes on to say, usually as fans, we analyze the team and say what holes there are. The Giants game was so frustrating. They got beaten every single way. Well, two things. One, it's difficult to admit when your team is bad sometimes. I feel like the Philadelphia fan is a little bit more pessimistic, we'll call it, about their teams than optimistic the majority of the time. I hear the person who's Ben Simmons is never going to shoot a three. Ben Simmons is always going to be a problem. Or I'll hear the comment about Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills is the bum. He'll never be a good football player, even though you won a Super Bowl with him at cornerback. I feel like the Philadelphia fan is a little bit more demonstrative in their pessimism than optimistic and positive. So now, Dan, from EHC, maybe you're a little different. Maybe you're trying to be a little bit more realistic, even though you say reality stinks. But look, I think that at the end of the day, when it comes to the Philadelphia team, Dan's right, though. The Eagles got beaten every single way, and reality does stink, at least for the Philadelphia Eagles. More of your texts coming up this hour, 609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com. Text board 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation here on Game Night. Coming up next, talk Sixers and NBA with Bryan Toporek here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
We'll get back to your text in just a bit at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. You're on the playsugarhouse.com text board, but joining me right now to talk more about the Sixers, the NBA. I feel like since 12 o'clock yesterday, 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern, it's just been a flurry of rumors and moves, and it's like all this pent-up frustration of the moratorium on all transactions is just spilling out everywhere. So to get all of that, Daryl Morey, the Sixers, and more, Bryan Toporek, co-host of the NBA podcast, also writes about the NBA and the 76ers for Forbes Sports, joins us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Bryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing pretty good. So let's try to get some clarity to some of the what feels like pent up, just whatever it's been for however amount of time it's been. So we've seen Giannis get Bojan Bogdanović and Drew Holiday. We know that James Harden supposedly wants out of Houston, but it was the Sixers, but now it's the Nets, and now there's a Shams report that Russell Westbrook could be traded for John Wall, and we know that Dennis Schroeder got traded to the Lakers, and that was the guy that the Milwaukee wanted. That's why they went and got Drew Holiday. Am I missing anything here?
There was a minor deal involving Bruce Brown from the Pistons, but absolutely no one cares about that. So, no, you got the big one. Oh, Robert Covington.
Oh, Covington to the Blazers. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Chris Paul. We forgot about that. But
yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, that one was rumored since last week, so we kind of knew that one was coming. But the Drew thing in particular, it was rumored, but it came pretty much out of nowhere.
So of all the moves that have happened since 12 o'clock yesterday, what is one that either stood out to you the most, surprised you the most, or is kind of making you give like the side eye?
Yeah, well, I guess surprised me the most is the Bogdan Bogdanović one, just because in theory, if we're abiding by the free agent moratorium, like teams should not be allowed to even negotiate sign-in trades until 6 p.m. Friday. So the fact that the Bucks have already agreed to one begs the question of whether they're going to be facing a hefty fine for that. But just in general, I think the Drew Holiday move is, it's an all-in push for them. Like the Bucks gave up 3 first-round picks and 2 first-round pick swaps. All of them, they're giving up their pick this year, and then everything else is in 2024 or beyond. So it's a pretty risky move. It almost makes you think that they have to have a commitment from Giannis Antetokounmpo already, that he's going to sign the Supermax, because otherwise, Drew, he has a player option for next year. He could be a free agent next year. If Giannis doesn't sign an extension, he can be a free agent next year. So I can't imagine they gave up that much draft capital without knowing these guys are going to be here for at least a couple of years.
How much do you think also when it comes to Giannis is the fact that and I'm not saying this to be flippant, but that the Bucks understand their superstar maybe more than some other teams understand theirs. Like I feel like there is this incredible disconnect between James Harden and the Rockets, whereas it feels like the Bucks have a much better understanding of Giannis.
Yeah, and I think Giannis, I mean, he's never given the impression that he wants to leave the Bucks. Like he said that he wants to stay, he wants to win a championship in Milwaukee, and it comes off as genuinely sincere. I think the Bucks just had to look at how the last two playoffs have gone, especially this past year, and they had to start getting a little nervous, knowing that, Miami really took it to them in the second round this year. Boston isn't going anywhere. Who knows what's going to happen with this Brooklyn stuff. Philly can always put something together as well. So, I think they're looking at the landscape and saying, if we don't at least make the finals this year, there's a real chance we lose this guy. And I think that's why they gave up as much as they did for New Orleans. Like it's a pretty clear overpay if you're evaluating it just as this is what they gave up for Drew Holiday. But if it is, from the Bucks perspective, this is what we're giving up for Drew Holiday plus guaranteeing that Giannis is going to sign the Supermax, then there's no price they wouldn't pay. Because if Giannis leaves, they're not getting another player like him for, God knows how long.
Right. Last time they had a guy of Giannis's caliber was, 50 years ago with drafting Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like the Bucks franchise doesn't have superstars like this caliber come through that often.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a small market team. They have to really put a premium, and if it means overpaying on a guy to make sure you keep your superstar, it's a risk you have to take.
How much are you buying or not buying all this fiasco around Harden? Because I feel like every hour there's a new report, the variation of another report. And I don't remember if it was Zach Lowe or Bryan Windhorst, but one of them came out and they said they were like, I don't even know what to believe anymore because I'm hearing so many variations of the same story.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I believe there's been enough people reporting that he wants out. I very much believe that. Enough people have reported his interest in Brooklyn that I believe that too. Whether Brooklyn has enough to make the Rockets actually trade him, that's what I'm not sure of. But I mean, as the hours and days go on, it does seem increasingly likely that James Harden could be on the Nets as early as, this weekend. I think the writing is on the wall for that Houston team where, their owner has just been so reluctant to spend what it takes to assemble a championship contender. He's tried to duck the luxury tax over the last few years. And I think if you're James Harden, knowing, we were one of the few teams that actually challenged the dynastic Golden State Warriors, and who knows, if we had one or two more depth pieces, maybe we beat them in 2018. I think that's got to wear on you after a while. So, seeing the changes they made this offseason with Daryl Morey stepping down and then later coming to Philly, Mike D'Antoni leaving, now this trade with Robert Covington. I mean, I think it's pretty clear what the ultimate move is going to be. I just don't know whether it's, do they pull the trigger now or do they wait to see if they can smooth things over at the start of the season or even until next summer. I mean, that's the one thing that's working in the Rockets' favor. They're not under immediate pressure to move him. He's under contract at least for 2 more years, and he has a giant player option close to $47 million in 22-23. So, it's not like an Anthony Davis situation with the Pelicans where there's 1 year left and this guy's definitely going to walk. They can keep Harden this year and still have no right. They can always revisit trade talks next offseason. They're not risking losing him for nothing quite yet.
Bryan Toporek joining me here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at @BToporek. Also download the latest episode of the NBA podcast. Bryan, let's get to the Sixers. Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers both came here, in their own words, because of who's on the Sixers. Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. So why is everybody so quick to trade one of these guys? Except for the two people whose responsibility are to trade them or not.
Hasn't that been the case for like the last 3 years? I feel like there's just been this insistence on Ben and Joel can't work together. They're definitely going to trade one at some point. Let's just do it now. So, it's no surprise, especially given Daryl's connection to James Harden. I am in no way surprised to see Ben Simmons being connected in those rumors.
So what are the Sixers' plans? Because if we take them at face value, and I don't feel like Doc and Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey are like these conniving, manipulative people. I feel like they're pretty straightforward kind of guys. So, do we take them purely at their word that their plan is to build around Ben and Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is their plan for now. If the Rockets come calling and say, we're going to move James Harden, we're either going to trade him to Brooklyn or we're giving you a chance. If we'll do Ben Simmons for James Harden straight up, then I think it's something they consider. If the Rockets call and say, we want Ben Simmons, but we also want Matisse Thybulle, Shake Milton, 4 first-round picks, then I think the Sixers aren't necessarily under pressure to make that type of a blow-it-up move. Like, I really do believe that Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers would like to see how those two guys play in the system that they implement. Not to say that Brett Brown did a bad job with those guys, because they were pretty successful over the last few years. But, I think Doc Rivers is going to come in with his own ideas, his own rotations, his own system. And I genuinely do believe that they see these guys are under contract for a few more years. They're both in their mid-20s. Like, there's no urgency to move them yet. And, I especially wonder, after seeing what the Bucks did, seeing them go all in, whether that deters the Sixers from making a move like trading Ben Simmons for James Harden. Because, even if they do that, I don't know that they're beating the Bucks next year.
Also, is there maybe a possibility that the Sixers look at the net situation and the other teams and say, yeah, you guys go out there and basically unload all of your assets to get all these players, and then if it doesn't work out in those two teams, like the Bucks and Nets, we'll be still sitting here pretty.
Right. It's very possible. I mean, Boston isn't going anywhere. That's the one concern. But yeah, I think if you see, if Harden goes to the Nets and the Bucks go all in, let those two teams duke it out next year and hope they implode at some point. And then it's probably you in Boston, maybe Miami, to take supremacy in the East.
Now, speaking of supremacy in the East, obviously the 76ers, if they're going to get there, I mentioned in the last segment, we had super high expectations for this team, and it feels like that ante has been ratcheted up because of Doc and Daryl being here. So what are realistic for the Sixers in this condensed offseason and then going into this upcoming season starting December 22nd?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Sixers Twitter has been infatuated with the idea of a Al Horford for Buddy Hield trade since February, I feel like. I wonder if Bogdan Bogdanovic being traded from Sacramento, if that affects the Kings' willingness to trade Buddy Hield, because it seemed like it was a one or the other type thing, and it seems like they've chosen Hield over Bogdan. So I've never been sold on that framework. I've always wondered why the Kings say yes in general, but now I'm especially skeptical of that. So, honestly, it would not shock me if the Sixers don't make a ton of big moves this offseason. I know it's not what Sixers fans want to hear, and, I could be totally wrong. I never want to count out Daryl Morey, to say the least, but I think the same thing that applies with Ben and Joe might apply to the whole roster, where they want to see, can we figure out a way to better maximize Tobias Harris? Are there ways that we can get more out of Al Horford than we did last year? Josh Richardson is the one guy who I could see them moving on from, just because he's going to be a free agent next offseason, and I don't think they, frankly, plan on spending the money to retain him. So if they can get someone else, a better fitting piece in his place, maybe a point guard. I saw, I think Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer mentioned a Josh Richardson for Patty Mills as a possibility. So that wouldn't shock me. Otherwise, I mean, they're limited to the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $5.7 million. I think they're just going to be looking for more shooters and ball handlers. And then, they have minimum contracts too. So, DJ Augustine, I feel like, is one of their best bets. Jeff Teague, Wes Matthews, if he's not going to stay with Milwaukee, could be interesting. Avery Bradley, Austin Rivers, especially given his relationship with Doc, but also Morey. I wouldn't be shocked to see him come on a min deal. But, I mean, they're pretty limited because of how much money they gave out last summer to Allen Tobias.
Now, tomorrow night, we have the NBA draft. Folks can hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. The Sixers don't just have a pick in the 20s, they also have a bunch of picks in the second round. So, knowing what you know about Daryl Morey, what do you expect to happen tomorrow night?
I think it is safe to say they will not be making all 5 picks. I can almost guarantee that. Whether they use some of those picks to trade up, whether they trade some of those seconds for future picks, I don't know. I mean, they could use some of them on draft and stash guys or on two-way players, which I think would be smart. The only thing I don't want them to do is sell picks for cash, although I can almost guarantee that they're going to sell at least one of them just because of how far over the luxury tax threshold they are. The draft is their opportunity to add cheap talent, which they very badly need because of how much money they owe to Joel, Ben, Al, Tobias. And we saw with a guy like Shake Milton how valuable it can be to hit on one of these picks. I mean, the odds, the hit rate is not great on second-round picks. Like, chances are you're probably not going to get much more than a rotation player. But when you do, that player is worth his weight in gold, especially considering how much money you owe to these other guys. So I would like to see the Sixers take as many swings with the bat as they can. But, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to trade at least one. And, again, I think they mostly look at shooters, wings, ball handlers. I doubt they put too much of a premium on bigs in the draft.
Now, with that being said, I've heard a lot of names this week for the Sixers. I think I've been sold on Tyrell Terry of Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot of Cole Anthony. People are conflicted on that one. I've heard some Malachi Flynn. I've heard a lot of different names. Isaiah Joe, I know that report's out there right now that apparently he was promised the Sixers will draft him somewhere along the draft. So is there a prospect that you think makes the most sense?
Yeah, I mean, all three of those guys I think would be good fits. Desmond Bane is one of my favorites. He's just an absolute elite shooter. Grant Riller, too, out of Charleston. I think he's probably going to be more of a second-round guy, which is fine. I mean, they have 34 and 36, so they could easily grab him if he falls there. Devon Dodson's another guy, Kansas guard, with one of their second-round picks possibly. I think they're going to have a lot of options. Like, this draft is not very top heavy. So it's, if you're Minnesota with the number 1 pick, that's why you're trying to look to trade down, or Golden State with the number 2 pick. But this draft does seem to have a lot of depth, a lot of possible rotation players. So having 21, 34, 36 in particular, there's a chance that the Sixers actually find 1 or 2 guys who can genuinely contribute.
Now, you said this draft has a lot of depth, but the one thing I've heard also is that, and I'm no NBA draft expert, but the thing the experts are saying is that there's no guaranteed superstar in this draft, at least near the top. So between the big names at the top, you have Anthony Edwards, you have James Wiseman, you have LaMelo Ball. Do you have a guy that you like the most out of those 3?
I would lean LaMelo, but like you, I'm not pouring over hours of draft tape. So this is a very lukewarm take. And it's, we had Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report on our podcast a few weeks ago to do a draft preview. He very much scared me off of Wiseman. He said he's got Wiseman closer to the bottom half of his top 10 than the top 3. So that makes me nervous. And then Anthony Edwards sounds like he has the prototypical frame for a 2-guard, but there are some questions just about his mindset and motivation, like some Andrew Wiggins vibes. So it might be LaMelo just by process of elimination more than I think this guy is definitely, MVP potential or multiple All-Stars. I think he's probably just the safest of the 3.
And the other thing is also because of the teams that are at the top, Minnesota 1, the Warriors 2, obviously the destination has a lot to do with this too, right? Like, for example, I think a lot of people are, if you're not a Warriors hater, you're salivating over the idea of James Wiseman going to the Warriors, whereas there are some people who are saying should it be Edwards going to Minnesota because he's more of an off guard than LaMelo Ball would be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's also why Minnesota is reportedly trying to trade down. There was a rumor of Charlotte really liking Wiseman, and the Warriors have been connected to Wiseman for a while, so Charlotte would have to jump over them. And I think the Timberwolves would probably like nothing more than to not have to make that decision and just let whoever falls to them, they can take that guy and pick up another asset as well.
Well, I'm looking forward to the drama. Folks can hear it all here on 97.3 ESPN tomorrow night. I know you and Morton Jensen will have a lot to talk about all week long and the next couple of weeks on the NBA podcast. Folks can catch that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you follow Bryan on Twitter for all of your NBA and Sixers coverage at Toporek on Twitter. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Bryan, always appreciate the time.
Absolutely, Josh. Happy to come on anytime. Thanks for having me.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Game Night being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. Back to the text board next, 609-403-0973. Here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com. Text board. We'll get you back to Dan from EHC. Another text in just a moment. Josh Hennig here on Game Night. And remind you, Game Night being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. You know how much of a gym and health and fitness guy I am when I'm not dealing with everything in the radio world. Well, what if you're someone who wants to do a little bit more? What if you're someone who wants to add something to your gym routine, or maybe you're not ready to go back to the gym? You know, the way the world is right now, we don't know what things are going to be like in the next few weeks. So maybe you're trying to prepare for a scenario where you got to work out from home. Or what if you know someone, you want to buy them their next at-home gym? Well, weightliftinghq.com is just what you're looking for. And when I heard about what weightliftinghq.com has and can do for fellow weightlifting and fitness enthusiasts, I was very impressed. Because at weightliftinghq.com, they are a local company right here in South Jersey that operates fully online. And they cater to all types of fitness and weightlifting and health and fitness people out there trying to work out from home. They offer high-end weightlifting and fitness equipment like bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, heart rate sensors, fitness watches, resistance bands, and more. You can't beat the local customer service and incredibly competitive prices. So check them out online at weightliftinghq.com and use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Again, whether you're trying to work out from home, add to your fitness routine, or it's almost Christmas time, you're trying to buy something for that person in your life that you want to help them take that next step for 2021. Well, go to weightliftinghq.com. Use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's weightliftinghq.com, Radio10 for 10% off your entire order. 609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com text board. Dan from EHC left this question a little bit earlier, and I wanted to save it to now because I didn't want to rush this question. He says, where do the Eagles go from here? If it all goes bad, as is looking to go, do we blow it up? Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles owner, has shown he doesn't stand for bad football. I think Jeffrey Lurie's also shown that he doesn't totally pull the plug on everything just because. He has to have a good reason. You know, because of injuries, Andy Reid has some difficult seasons as well, and he kept Andy Reid employed. So I don't foresee Doug Peterson getting the cable cord pulled on him per se. And the problem is Carson Wentz's contract is a little cost prohibitive in terms of trying to move on from him, because as of right now, if you were to trade him this offseason before next year, you're still on hold for about $9.2 million. Now, it's a $25 million savings on the cap, so you would save a lot of money, but that's still a good amount of money you got to eat next year. Now, again, it's doable if you're willing to do it, and you feel like the Carson Wentz experiment, it's just not doable anymore. Yes, there is a way out, but you got to eat that $9.27 million. And it's going to be like that until before the 2024 season. It's only through 2023 that you're on the hook, it's called, for that money. After that, you can only eat $6 million and move on. So it really depends on how much you want to, blow it up. I don't think Jeffrey Lurie is going to blow up everything just because we know about his relationship with Howie Roseman. We know how the organization views Doug Peterson. I think that it's just been a tumultuous last few years because of all the injuries, because of the situation with Wentz and everything that's going on. Maybe there is just something to the fact that Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz have a disconnect. So where do you go from here? I think you go one of three ways. You either see how the season plays out, and if Carson Wentz is able to turn it around for the last half of the season, you use that as a way to amplify this team moving forward and say, okay, Carson, you know what you can do. We know what you can do. Now it's on you to do it, right? The second layer of that is a situation where, let's be realistic, okay? There's a situation where they could move on from Wentz. I wouldn't do it until I see the season play out, but if he keeps playing poorly, then you might have to. You can't keep going on this way. The third option is what you do is you keep Wentz and you keep Peterson, but you get rid of the quarterback coach. There's a part of me that wonders if there's too many contradicting voices in Carson Wentz's ear. Press Taylor is, trying to give him this, reinforcement that's not helping him. I don't know. I'm not very high on Press Taylor. I don't know why we don't talk about him enough. I mean, the guy was from the Chip Kelly era. Has anything good come out of the Chip Kelly era? I'm Josh Hennig. This is GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. I'll catch you tomorrow, 6 p.m. after the Sports Bash.